Hello, and I've interviewed Jeremiah Schmidt before, and I'm focusing on sales. And at first you think broad. That sales, at first you're like, how could this benefit me? I have no intention of becoming a salesman, but you're always selling yourself when you're going to a job interview, when you're trying to have a school accept you for college, when you are trying to get on a date, when you are trying to impress people. So we're in a position because of life, and especially have goals, you have to sell yourself, and you are the product, even if you don't have a business. And one of the things is on my entrepreneur journey, I want to have experiences that will help me get to where I want to be. So eventually, I want to sell my products and that sort of thing. So right now, I'm in the process right now of reaching out to real estate agents and trying to do cold calls for them just to get myself out there. And also, I believe from sales and the whole experience, you can get more confident in yourself and build some personable skills that will help you in all areas of your life. And with that, here is Jeremiah Schmidt. Could you give me a short, brief background of your experience in sales, what kind of sales you did, and that sort of thing? Just a brief overview.
100%. Well, first of all, Robert, I just want to thank you for letting me join your podcast. And yeah, I guess I'll talk a little bit about me. Like, I'm 25 years old. I live in Calgary, Alberta, and I work as a SDR. So I work for a tech company here. And essentially, what an SDR is I would just consider it a professional cold caller, a professional outreacher. I essentially set up the sales meetings for our account executives. But my journey when it comes to sales is my dad worked as a financial advisor, and pretty much in the financial world, he did sales every single day. And how I kind of got into it was I was always kind of like a quiet, introverted person. I would say, yeah, I'd say I was more of an introvert in college, and played a lot of video games. Didn't really talk to too many people, but over time, I just realized that I needed to, get out of my comfort zone. So it's actually funny. I made this bet with a friend, and we played this game called League of Legends, and I literally spent a whole semester playing that game and just not studying, and I just really put myself in kind of a bad spot. And I was really kind of like after that year, I was really kind of awkward. Like I didn't really talk to people that much. I had trouble like selling my ideas. Just was totally scared of sales. And I read this book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And then after that, I went out and tested it. I started going around campus, talking to people, letting people know who I am. And I just made a lot of friends in college. And then from there, I wasn't exactly the best student. I took a math degree, but I really kind of had this entrepreneurial spirit, and I tried to start a couple um, businesses. I started like a SEO marketing agency, and part of that was sales. And from that, I created this thing called Anvil SEO, and I had to try and sell my services. I worked as a consultant, and I guess like that's how I naturally kind of got into sales, is just being someone who was a little bit introverted, a little bit shy in college, and then just knew that, okay, if I live like this for the rest of my life and I can't express my ideas or share what I know, because think about it this way, Robert, like every single one of us has like we naturally can sell, right? If you when you're a kid, let's say you want a toy. I remember at this one point when I was little, we were driving to this place called Edmonton. It's maybe like 3 hours away from Calgary. And for whatever reason, one of my friends, his dad got him like a Mac computer. And I remember the whole trip, I asked my parents for like a new computer. Literally, like I sounded like a broken record, and I just wouldn't stop. I just literally kept asking, like, Dad, can I get a new computer? Mom, can I get a new computer? That whole trip, and I just would not shut up. And the thing is, that's sales. And eventually, they just broke down. And I think that week, like I somehow got the new computer. Like I just didn't stop asking. And I think that's the core of sales. Is like you have something that you want, right? there's the space between, and you have to figure out how to get there, and how you get there is through communication, and the core of it is persistence, right? So like just being willing to ask for what you want, and then find ways to provide value to get it, right? And I think that's the core of sales, is just kind of like a willingness to act, a willingness to meet people, a willingness to you know a willingness to go into the world and ask for what you want. I think that's the core of what sales is, and it's something each of us have.
Putting yourself out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it is true. When we're children, we'll say our needs and wants all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and with
Yeah,
no fear.
yeah, and I think like in the modern
It's so
era,
true.
yeah, and part of it too is like in the modern era, there's like kind of this rep to sales that it sometimes gets a bad rep, like, oh, like car sales, or like a slimy salesman. Like sometimes you hear that, and the total thing is, I totally disagree with that, because I feel like sales is fundamental to entrepreneurship, right? Everyone is participating in sales, and like and the thing is, it's good to do it ethically, right? Like if you know that you can truthfully help someone, maybe there's someone that who um, is struggling in some area, or maybe there's a product that you genuinely like, or a book that you just read and it actually had some really good effect on you. You might as well share it to someone and say, hey, this is what I did, and this is how it affected me, and I know that you're going through this same struggle. Give it a read, it if you want to read it, right? And that's sales, right? It's just like, I look at it as almost just
It is
sharing.
true. That's
Yeah.
so true, and something of value.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, How to Win Friends and Influence People is on my reading list for this year. So I
Mm-hmm.
made a reading list. So that was one that was kind of now I was like reading one book at a time, which was good. But now I'm have like 5 books, and then I'll focus on one book a week. So now I'm hitting more things because that was like a great example. I would say to myself, God, the years go by and I keep on having that book somewhere in the back of my head, and I'm like, ah.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a solid book. Like I think, see, actually, it's kind of weird though, because my views on how to influence and influence people kind of changed a little bit. Like I truly believe in, especially like in an SDR role or an account executive role, like just like I believe in the fundamentals of being kind of a straight shooter when it comes to sales. Like in some of the sales books out there, you'll find that like, oh, if someone talks like this, try and mimic their tone, or try and ask, always say their name, or try and like, there's these little kind of gimmicks, which yes, like in a sense, like they kind of do work, but I truly believe that um, it's okay to just be like honest, and especially when closing sales, it's always going to be a little bit uncomfortable. Like when you're asking for a meeting, or you're asking for like for if they're willing to buy, or with pricing, like it's always a little bit uncomfortable. And I really think that the best way to sell when you're in those situations, like true, you know, bare bones sales, is to be like a straight shooter, like be honest, just say how it is. If it's the wrong product for the customer, and you know that maybe they're looking for a certain problem with like their watch repair, and like the type of watch repair you have doesn't you can't fix those type of watches.
Mm-hmm.
You have to tell them off the bat, like, we don't do these watches, and you're better off going somewhere else, right? It's
And
I
you
feel
could
like
even
sometimes
recommend, you could
yeah.
even, if you know somebody that fits their need, you could even recommend that, and later they might um buy something else that fits,
Mhm.
and they'll
Yeah.
still remember you in a positive light.
Yeah, and part of it too is like I really thought about like ethics when it comes to sales is so important, because it's really easy to make a lot of money early if you only think about the money, and you just think about, okay, anyone who comes through these doors, I'm gonna sell them, right? Like no matter what, if it's the wrong car for the family, I'm gonna try and sell it, right? And that's one way you could look at it, but it's more of a short-term game, right? You only can do that so long, but I feel like people who last long in the sales industry, they have to be ethical, because all of a sudden people start to remember them, right? Like if you did something unethical early in your career, people are smart, right? Like they're gonna know you 20 years and be like, okay, no, I'm not gonna buy from this person, or like I don't trust this person. So I think like being honest when it comes to sales, and you know books like How to Win Friends and kind of some other content that comes to sales that is kind of psychology based. Yes, I think it's good to kind of be aware of that, but like I wouldn't take it like I wouldn't follow it 100% because I think that the honest, integrity, genuine, you know, basic sales skills, like when just imagine as if you were a little kid, right? You walk into some place and you or a new friend and you want that person to be your friend, right? You would just say hi. This is who I am, and this is just without all that complex stuff, right? I think that's probably the
Mm-hmm.
best way to sell because it's true, and years later, people will trust you. It's ethical, right? And I think that's really important for anyone who's selling because it's really easy to get carried away and just think about the money when you really should think about the long term, you know, like where you can go long term because in a money sense, if you're an ethical salesperson and you last for 20 years, you're going to make way more money in the long term than someone who just thinks about how much money can I make, in 1 year, right? So I think always
So
looking at
true.
like, yeah, always looking at the long-term effect of your actions is very, very important in sales. And with that, it's like the gateway to entrepreneurship, the gateway to everything. Like it's such a core skill.
That's so true. And I think the other thing that you were touching on there is be yourself and be natural.
100%.
And that's another thing where you can connect with people. Because if you're too focused on it's done this way in this rigid little formula,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to be showing your true personality. Now you're this rigid little formula.
100%. Yeah, like I remember growing up, my dad used to tell me about this kind of like financial advisor in like kind of the insurance space. So his name was Ralph Zielsdorf. He was like a not your typical salesperson, kind of quiet, awkward, like a shy guy. But this guy was literally like one of the top insurance salespeople in North America. Like he was
Mm.
crushed, $1 million plus earner, just go like, and people like he wasn't your typical extroverted sales guy, right? And the thing is, anyone I think can be good at sales, right? It's not just the extroverted person who is outgoing. It's, if you're an introverted person, you can still crush it at sales, but you have to find your own way. Like, and I think that's why persistence when it comes to sales is core because if you're maybe naturally more quiet, you don't like, cold calls, emails, all that stuff gets uncomfortable, but you're just like a very persistent person, you know, as an introvert, there's a lot of strengths that you have when it comes to maybe one-on-one in those deals, you work really well because even though you're quiet, people like and trust you, right? So there's anyone can sell, right? It's really just a belief on if you want to. It's I think it really comes down to a choice if you want to do it or not, right? And yeah, like we're all salespeople here.
So true. What has working in sales taught you about life
This is a good question.
in general? In general.
Um, Actually, this is a great question. So I guess for me, like I've over the last year, I've been cold calling a lot of executives, a lot of just different types of people, anyone from administrators, executives, VPs, directors, managers, like all roles of companies. And I really just I think what I've learned from talking to all these people is, every single person you meet, every single person you talk to is kind of just like you. Like they have their bad days. Maybe you have a phone call with someone and they're just a little bit irritated. Maybe you have a phone call with someone and they're bored and they just want to kind of chat for a bit or just, their mind's on COVID or they're stressed about their kids at home or, most people are just the same. And when you look at like a lot of people, sometimes you could look at like an executive and be like, oh, this is a CEO, or you could look at an administrator and kind of treat them differently. But what I've learned from sales is it's so important to treat people no matter where they come from. Like you could be a janitor, you could be an executive, you could be homeless. All people are pretty much the same. And at the end of the day, it's important to just be willing to communicate with those people, right? And I think that's what I've really pulled away from sales is just, most people are the same. Most people are pretty good people, kind of happy go lucky. Everyone has their bad days and it's okay. And, you know, Another thing I kind of pulled away from sales too is that sometimes maybe you'll set meetings, maybe you'll have deals that look like they're going to close or whatever, and for whatever reason, they just fall apart. And it kind of sucks. Like it just sucks when you feel that loss, but it's part of it. Like in order to be really good at sales, I believe you have to be comfortable taking losses. And I think that's another lesson I've learned is just being okay with taking losses and just being like, okay, it's fine. Continue to kind of chug along, because what I've seen in sales, and I guess in the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey, is there's a lot of times when you'll lose. Like there's a lot of times I tried to start 3 other entrepreneurial ventures. I tried to start like a jewelry company when I was in college. 2 kind of digital marketing things, and I ended up like they didn't succeed to the level that I wanted to, but it doesn't mean that you have to give up. It just means that you look at it, you learn, and then you keep on pushing forward. And in sales with cold calls, you'll experience that all the time, or with deals that you have, you'll experience that all the time. So really just like persistence and being okay with taking losses.
And you build the knowledge of what to do from those losses. So in the end, they're gains.
Yeah, exactly. Like at the end of the day, like you always have to give things a shot, and they might not work out according to plan or like ideally, but it's okay. Like you look at what you can learn and then you try again.
So you'd say that sales has a lot of life lessons that can be applied to general things
100%.
that can help you in other areas of your life.
100%. Yeah.
What skills does it take to become a successful salesperson or salesman?
So I would say there's only one skill when it comes to sales, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it just comes down to persistence. Like literally anyone can do this. It doesn't matter what your personality is, whether you're extroverted, introverted, but the fundamental thing is, when you're in sales, you're gonna have to be able to taste rejection, and like it never gets easier, but you just get better. And like that's the core of it. Like if you're able to persist, if you're comfortable hearing no's or just kind of having a little bit of awkwardness, you know, it's like if you're able to handle that and just continue on, then you're good. Like you'll be fine. And I think just having persistence, perseverance, toughness, durability, like it's kind of all the same thing. And I think that's the core of sales. Like there's literally um, stories and history, and it really relates to kind of COVID too. Like this is kind of a troubling time for a lot of people out there in the world. Like for me, I like seeing people face to face. So I don't really like being quarantined to my home or anything like that. But I think the key to it is like we're somehow, all of us in North America, we're somehow like surviving through this, lasting through this. And that's the same quality that you pull into sales, right? Like some days are hard, some days are repetitive, but you just have to continue to persist on. And there's literally stories and history of, Alexander the Great, for example, who at one point he was able to, go into India. He got that far. And there's this famous battle that I always kind of think about, especially when I'm working in sales. But there's this castle that they were trying to fight, and he was on this siege tower with 3 other guards. And as soon as they got to the top of the tower, the siege tower actually collapsed. So him and 3 other guards were able to get to the top of this castle, but they were surrounded by hundreds of the other army, and the rest of their army was just on the ground there. So like they were in a really tricky situation there. And back then too, the crazy thing is like if they would have caught Alexander the Great, they would do crazy things to him. Like they would literally torture people, skin people alive. Like it was mess. It was not nice. It was not good, right? But what he did when he got to the top of that castle, and this is crazy, he actually charged. He actually charged into those hundreds of horses. And the crazy thing about that is they were shocked. Like they were literally shocked. Like, what is going on here, right? And the thing is, like, he ended up getting an arrow to the chest. I think it was the left side. His 3 other guards actually died, but because they actually charged, it gave him enough time for the rest of his army to come over the castle, and he actually won that battle. He survived. So, so when you think about persistence, when you think about like times in history, like that's the core of really sales, is just you just don't give up. Like you can't quit. There's like, that's what I really cling to. Like, at sales, there's a lot of moments where I've experienced like maybe, you know, like for example, I've had months, like last month was a good example where just for whatever reason, Christmas holidays, I wasn't able to perform as well as I wanted to. And it's just something that happens. Like you're gonna take a loss. And I always tend to cling to those stories and think about, okay, you know, just persist through this. And actually another skill too that when it comes to sales is really going to be just consistency. Like I look at sales as more just as a mathematical equation, right? If you do like your consistent actions every single day, eventually it's going to turn into results. And I think that's also another key skill is just being persistent and being consistent.
Yeah, I think also sometimes we're down and we don't feel like doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I found in my life, sometimes when I'm kind of down, I don't feel like doing something, and then I do it, then something positive happens.
100%.
And then you're like, and I didn't feel like doing it. And then sometimes we get rewarded for that. And it snaps us out of our mood too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's also another cool quote I love too. It's like impatience with actions, um, patience with results. So I think
I
that
love
that's
that.
just that for me. That just sums up sales, right? Like you have to be willing to act. You might not get the results you want, but just be patient with it.
Yeah, in general, in all areas of our life.
Mhm.
What lessons have you learned as a salesman?
What lessons? Mm, well, I guess I've listed persistence, consistency. I'll try and think of a third one. Um, I guess another lesson I've kind of learned, and this just maybe comes back to life in general, but you know, I think especially with sales, and I always think about this at work because like persistence is so key. Uh, it's really easy to get stuck in this mindset of just making it difficult or like hard for yourself. And I guess what I've realized over this last year, especially just working from home, it was kind of when the quarantine first hit, and I knew that I had to work from home in sales. It was actually really hard for me because I just was kind of out of my element. I like to go into the office and like see people, and I had to figure out a way how to, be comfortable at home and not get discouraged. And I think what I learned is it's really important to kind of have a playful attitude, at least for me. I think this depends on each person, but when I look at sales, it doesn't have to be hard if you turn it into a game. And that's the way I really look at it is when I set up my schedule at home, I would just kind of have fun with it, right? I have a lot more control now. I can wake up any time, and I would turn it into a little game. Like it doesn't have to be this hardcore, it just, keep pushing. Like I feel like if you kind of have that playful attitude, enjoy what you do, even though it's difficult, it's kind of like you're having fun and then it doesn't feel like work. So I think that's another part that I've learned too is just, especially with like YouTube and I'm trying to build a jewelry business seasons now. And every day I try and look at it as like, okay, like I don't think about like I don't get stressed about like all the work that I have to do. I just think about like maybe one thing. Like today, I'm thinking about, oh, I need to build like a privacy policy page. That one thing, and I'm just like, oh, that'll be kind of fun. Like let's just chip away and do that, get that done, and then I think about the next thing. And I think with sales, especially when you're just making cold calls or maybe you're dealing with clients and trying to move deals further down the pipe, is just be playful with it, right? Like I really look at working as a luxury, like especially with this pandemic. There's so many people who have gone through unemployment, so many people who have lost their jobs, and you know, especially in North America, like we kind of have this work culture. Like people work a lot here, right? Like the reason why I know this is because I did this video on YouTube. I did like a dopamine detox where I tried to do nothing for 24 hours, and I literally just walked around my city, Calgary, and it was actually difficult to do. But I just observed like the public, and what I noticed is like there were so many people working, and I never noticed that. Like
Mm.
construction workers, fish delivery people, job people jogging, people delivering like books, people delivering, skip the dishes. Like everyone I saw was just always working, always doing stuff. And I think that, you know, in our culture with that kind of being the norm, it's sometimes it can get really difficult to do that if you don't have a playful, like, enjoy what you do spirit behind you, because, you know, life, there's a lot of work that you're gonna have to do, especially as an adult. So you might as well have fun. I don't know where I was going with that, but I think that's another skill I've learned in sales is
Well, that's
just
so
enjoy it,
true.
like have fun.
Yeah. Well, the thing that I'm doing is all my goals, I pretend I'm playing a board game,
Yeah, like
basically.
100%. And I know that, like, you played pool, like you play a lot of pool, and I think that helps you in your videos, right? Like making videos, doing these podcasts, you know, it is work, but like because you enjoy doing it, you have kind of that, you know, just like when you're playing pool, you kind of have that game attitude. You turn it into a game.
Exactly. So
Mhm.
true. I think you touched on this earlier. If anyone can become a good salesman, and you did touch on
100%.
that earlier.
100%. Yeah. I truthfully believe this, guys, that anyone out there, if you're listening to this, you can become great at sales. All it takes is, you know, a little bit of genuine interest. Like if you don't genuinely have interest in being in sales, then don't pursue it, right? Like
Yep.
you might as well pursue something that you have a genuine interest or kind of an inclining towards. But if you have like an inkling towards sales and you're like, oh, but I want to be in sales, but I don't think I'd be good at it, or I want to be in sales, but I don't really have the skills for it. Well, the only skill you need is just a little bit of interest and persistence, right? And trust me with that, like everything else is learnable.
That's true for anything. May it be ice skating, this, that, or it's so true.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I wasn't good at pool at all, and I was like one of the worst, but it caught my interest, so I stuck through it.
Mm-hmm.
What is your plan to increase your income through sales? Or what areas do you think that you can improve to get better at it?
So would you say, like, in terms of 2021?
Yes, or
Okay.
in the future.
Yeah, so I guess like where I see my where I see myself headed is, like, of course I can always improve my sales skill set, right? And I think what that comes down to is just the reps and the sets, right? It's just literally, the more I do it consistently with perseverance, I'll just naturally get better at it, right? So like that's one area where I want to improve my skill set. But a whole nother area too is, you know, at some point, I work as an SDR, and what an SDR does in, I guess, software sales is they set up appointments and kind of set up introductions for our account executives who, you know, demonstrate the product, demo the product, and close the product, actually close the deals. So I think where I see myself headed is I want to become an account executive someday and be someone who's actively, you know, closing deals, demonstrating the product with a solutions consultant. And on top of that, I think that entrepreneurship is something that I've, you know, just gotten started with this year with Seasons. And I think that they go hand in hand, right? Like sales, entrepreneurship, I really look at it as the same thing. You know, just be willing to move things forward, right? So I think that's where I would say, like, my income, if it was going to jump, it would come from those two things, like literally just being better at being an SDR, being more consistent, having more perseverance, just, you know, putting in the reps, like legit work, like putting in the actual reps.
Oh, there's the
Yeah,
reps. No.
yeah, the reps and sets, and then just naturally just being super consistent with that, and that'll just speak for itself. But on the other side of that is at some point thinking about, okay, the goal here is to become an account executive and an entrepreneur with Seasons, you know, and just working towards it, right? Like, don't obsess about it, but just actively put in work towards it.
Exactly. I like how the two jobs are linked together. I like that.
Mhm.
That's really cool. And they feed off of each other.
Yeah, and I think,
The
like,
skills, they're compatible, very compatible.
yeah, and I think, like, another core thing about sales too, like what I really like, sales is such a unique job, especially if, look, as far as if you have a career in sales, like in like car sales, software sales, whatever, or insurance. Sorry about that. But the beautiful thing about it is, like, you could literally increase your income by just, and you can see it instantaneously. Like, think about it. If you're making cold calls, if you make 10 more calls and you map it out, right? What I use is I use a calendar every day. I make a certain number of calls and mark it with an X. So it's really easy to see your income increase by just doing a little bit more work, and you can track it. And I think that sales is such a unique career because in a lot of fields, you're not necessarily, you can't see results that fast, right?
No.
Like say for example, at one point, I was working as a barista, right? I was working at a barista for a certain set wage, and no matter what, I could work super hard in the, like delivering coffee and with the clients, but I would only get set that certain wage. Maybe I'd make a little bit more on tips just with my attitude, but it was set. You know, when I worked at Canadian, I worked at a hardware store, and I was working really hard there, setting up shelves and just talking to customers. And I had a set wage, you know, $15 an hour, and it was capped. There's no way that could change. You know, I worked at as a marketing agency, and it was set, right? And I think with sales, because there's a commission aspect to it, typically your wages aren't going to be set, right? So if you work hard, you'll reap the rewards, right? And I think that is a natural kind of introduction to entrepreneurship, because what I've experienced so far as an entrepreneur, like setting up seasons, is there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of like, you know, I didn't really turn a profit yet because I'm setting up the store, ordering the product, just doing the designs. So I don't know how much money this is going to make, and it's kind of like a weird feeling. But the cool thing about it is that I know that, you know, the more work I do, it'll start to reap rewards. And it's the same philosophy when it comes to sales. Like the more work you do, you will reap the rewards. So
Yeah, getting back to the whole theme that you've said, persistence.
persistence, yeah, I think the whole thing is, guys, if you're watching this and you're interested in sales or just in life, I think that persistence is the most important quality you could ever have, because life is difficult. There's going to be, you know, so many rejections that you face. There's going to be, especially just as a young person in the modern world, right? Like the world's changing. It's, you know, you want to go out there and do stuff. You want to go there and follow your interests, you know, and you should follow your interests, right? And as you do that, there's going to be barriers. There's going to be like walls that you face. There's going to be, maybe you don't know how to do something. Maybe you don't have enough money. Maybe you're in like financial or emotional stress, and it's just difficult, right? Like, but it doesn't mean that you quit. It just means that just keep chipping away, and eventually you'll kind of find a way around this barrier. And I think that's something that is literally, that's what makes sales difficult. And it's also what makes sales easy, because when you look at selling, if there's only one skill, persistence, right? Well, if you take rejection a little bit too personally, and you know, it just, you feel like you easily get defeated, you easily get discouraged, then this might not be a good path for you, because you know, it's every day you're going to have to taste that, right? And it never gets easier, you just get better. So like, I would say if you're someone who, you know, doesn't like that feeling, then maybe this is the wrong path for you. But the way I see it is, everyone doesn't like the feeling, but the more you do it, the more that you taste it and just kind of come out of this being like, oh, I'm still alive, I'm okay. Like I failed, I got rejected, you know, they said no, but I'm alive, I'm still good here. This kind
Exactly.
of, yeah, the more comfortable you get, then the more you start to realize, oh, actually, like, if I face like 19 rejections, I'll hit a yes. If I face like 22 rejections, I'll hit a yes. And it starts to kind of reprogram your mind that says like, actually, facing these rejections isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. And perseverance starts to become just something that is natural to you.
Exactly. My last question is, how has your experience as a salesman helped you in other areas in your life that's
Mm.
separate from sales?
I would say this has helped me in a lot of areas. Like overall, like I would say my core is I'm kind of an introverted person. But like, I don't know. Actually, maybe I'm a little bit introverted and extroverted. I would say like I'm somewhere in between. But I think like what sales has really shown me, especially this last year, is that just like willingness to take action. Like I'm someone who, you know, back in college or like a lot of my life, I usually overthink things. sometimes way too long. I get too stuck in planning and trying to make things perfect. But what I've really looked at, or what I've really pulled away from working in sales, is just you have to act, right? And that's what I think about, all the time. I remember like the first like meeting I set up with the work that I do, like the where I work now. Like I remember my first meeting that I successfully set up, and I remember like I was so afraid to make my first couple of calls. I was like, oh man, this is weird. Like, this is really weird. Like, why am I doing this? And then I remember like it was in some of the first few calls I made. Like I had this conversation with a lady, and she just said like, yeah, sure. Like I just like she just literally picked up the phone. I asked her like, oh, do you want to meet on Thursday at 4 p.m.? And then she was like, sure. I was like, wait, what? So like it changed all the things
She
for
was
me.
like, oh yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing though.
And
Like
she
it just
sounded positive. I'm sure she sounded very positive too.
mm, yeah, and that's exactly the thing, Robert. It just made me think about like just take like be willing to act, right? Like I think that's what I've learned. Like just willing to act. Like you have to give things a shot. You have to try
Exactly.
and yeah.
Yeah, don't talk yourself out of something before you do it.
100%.
Think
And
about all the things that could go wrong. Like you
yeah,
said, you're still here, you're still alive.
yeah, exactly. Like
It
and
wasn't all these horrible things that happened and the whole universe didn't come crashing down on you or something.
yeah, and I think like for anyone out there, especially if you're someone who overthinks things naturally, or just get too much, like you get too much in that planning stage, like just take a couple actions and realize that you'll be okay, and just do a mixture of both. Like I think someone who's a great planner has a lot of unique skill set, because like if you're a great planner and then you have the action part, then there's so much you can do. Like when you look at a guy like Elon Musk, right? What I think is so interesting about him is he's such a great builder, but he also understands that sales part, right? Or like with Apple, there was Steve Wozniak and then Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was really good at selling. Steve Wozniak was really good at building. And like when you have that mixture of like
Oh yeah,
planning,
it's like a
selling,
good team, man.
mm, it's literally the A team.
You
Like,
got an A on one part and you have an A on the other part. Put that together, it's an A plus.
yeah, exactly. And I think that each of us can do both, right? Like if you're a planning type, like don't think bad about that. Like that's great, but also you can learn a little bit of that sales stuff, right? And there's a really good book I read back in the day, or like I knew about this. It's called John Nesbitt. Forget what it's called. It's called, I think it's High Tech versus High Touch. But it was essentially this guy who talks about as like in the internet age, in the modern world, as technology keeps on advancing, um, people naturally like have a need for high touch. High touch skills would be like like human to human connection, like face to face interactions, right? And that's something that's super important, because if you know those face to face interactions, human human connections, and then you're also tech savvy, that's just a beautiful combination. Because that's why when you look at social media on Instagram, people love like photos and communicating, and on Facebook communicating. That's that high touch that humans naturally have. But there's also like the tech side of it, and the tech side is always going to be getting better. Like technology always improves, but the part that we always need to reflect on is face-to-face communication, interacting, meeting people. That's always going to be valuable. So
So true. Our interpersonal skills.
interpersonal skills, yeah.
And I think part of that too, and this is something I think we could apply to sales too, is being a good listener.
Mhm.
And I think maybe with sales, if we get too into the script, we are just thinking instead of what we're going to say next, instead of hearing what they're saying. And sometimes maybe getting the sale is being able to connect to what they're saying.
Yeah, like actually, that is such a great point, and I can't believe I missed that during the podcast. But like literally, I think that's just such a staple. Like you just nailed it on the head, Robert, because questions and listening is so key. Because if you ask it, like let's say you're trying to sell a product, and you know that like based off the questions you ask, you know that this person doesn't have a need for the product. Like it would be a disservice for them to buy it. Then you generally have to, you know that there's no point in selling them. But if you ask them a question and say like, hey, like, have you been finding problems with your watch? Like, has it been slow? And then they're like, yeah, like it's been really slow. I think this could be a little bit better. Like, I don't really like the color here. You know that they're opening up with pains, and that's when it's really important to listen, because as soon as like a customer or prospect opens up with legitimate complaints, legitimate things that uh, are troubling them, right? Like maybe their computer is really slow, and they're like, oh, this I don't like Mac computers, or I don't like this certain Dell computers. I like Macs, but I don't like Dell computers because they're like slow or something, right? And they're giving you a legitimate complaint. You got to listen to that, right? And then it's really easy to sell to that person because you know that you're genuinely helping them, right? And I think that's why listening and questioning is such a pillar in sales. Like it's almost impossible to sell to someone who doesn't have genuine complaints or
Mhm.
genuine uh, concerns or pains that they're experiencing. Because what I've learned over the last like literally year of selling is that people, like, it's like you can't trick people. People are smart. Like people are especially way more smarter than you realize, and they always know. So like you have to be genuine and you have to listen to them, ask questions, and actually listen, right? And often the time, if you just ask a question, like an open-ended question, maybe it's like, hey, like, what challenges have you been having with your watch? You know, like, is there any other watches out there that you've thought about purchasing? Just listen to them. Like they might say, like, they'll literally tell you exactly what their pains are. They'll tell you exactly like where they're at. And if you generally just listen to them, they'll appreciate it, and they'll just ask you like for the price. So like that's probably the best way to sell is just, you know, introduce who you are, ask them a question, genuinely listen, and then service them based off their answer.
I
So
think the whole thing with dating too, is
mhm.
listening and that sort of thing, or having true deep friendships. That's the same thing.
Yeah, same thing in dating, same thing in meeting people, same thing in, selling a new product with your entrepreneurial venture. Like it's such a, I think that it's just inherent to us, right? It's a human skill. Like literally, you can go out tomorrow on the street corner and give someone like this book, The Hobbit. This is kind of random, but like you give someone this book, The
Mhm.
Hobbit, right? Just say like, hey, do you want this book? And that's sales, right? It's just they'd be like, hey, this is kind of weird. Like, who are you? Right? And you can say who you are and say
What's
like,
a
hey, why?
hobbit? Is
Mm.
that something I should aspire to be? Should I aspire to be a hobbit? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, well, that's as simple as it is, right? Like, it's just ask them a question, like, oh, like, would you ever want this book? Maybe they say yes. So
Are you
that's
into Are you into fantasy books? No, I'm not
exactly.
into fantasy books. I'm into blah blah blah. Oh, I read this book about blah blah blah. Maybe it's a fit for you.
Yeah,
You're
and
not
then
into fantasy books? Okay, we won't talk about hobbits.
yeah, exactly. Like maybe they like Harry Potter, or like they don't like the Hobbit, but they like Harry Potter. So like, oh, I have Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter here. So you service them for what they want, right?
Exactly, exactly. Well, thank you for your time. This is really good. And I like the timing. I'm trying to get some experience in this, and I'm starting at the ground level. And there's other people that are thinking about this. And also, if you're not thinking about this, think of the broader lessons about life. And that I was trying to touch on that too, because no matter what we're trying to do or accomplish, we're trying to sell ourselves and represent your product and be honest in all areas of your life. Otherwise these things will follow us and affect us negatively.
Yeah, and that's the thing, Robert. Like, I want to thank you for like inviting me on. Like, this is awesome. I love this
Well,
conversation.
thank
But
you.
I guess for anyone listening out there, and maybe had a little bit of interest in sales, or you don't know how to get into it. Maybe you're a quieter person and you want to get into this. I guess the only advice I'd have for you is just give it a shot. Like, just realize that anyone can do this, and it's a valuable thing that is inherent to all of us. And all it takes is just willingness to try.
Exactly. Thank you very much. And this is my first interview for the new YouTube channel, Goal Fulfillment.
Sweet. Thanks, Robert.
And definitely sales and goals go together. So it's definitely a fit. Thank you very much.